fishing, it's in my soul.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way. And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing. Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. Joe Simons, like diamonds, back again. My boy, Wyatt Parcell. What's up, dude?
What's going on, Joe? Here in Pensacola, ready to talk some vacation fishing.
So you're on vacation with your family, and we're going to talk about how to catch redfish, trout. I mean, basically slams. You guys caught a flounder I saw yesterday while on vacation in really a new spot that none of you guys live in. You kind of met in the middle.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a spot we've never been to. We were just here on vacation, and you know, my brothers and sisters, my parents, they've seen all the videos and everything. They're like, God, man, I want to go out and I want to catch some inshore fish. So just with a little bit of the principles that we talk about in the Insider Club, some spot selection, knowing what some summertime trends would be, even the network effect that we've talked about, connecting with some of the other insiders in this area has just been so beneficial. And we've been able to get onto fish consistently pretty much every single day while saving a ton of time doing it. I've been on a lot of vacations where fishing takes up the whole day and it can be tough on the rest of the family, but we're only fishing for, 2 hours in the morning and maybe an hour and a half in the evening. And I'm catching more fish now than I ever have on vacation with my family, because we've just transitioned from, not really doing a whole lot of pre-planning, not doing a whole lot of thinking about what we're doing, just putting lines in the water, to now we've actually got plans. A lot of the stuff we talk about in the Insider Club, we're going to cover all that in this podcast, but man, it has been so fun. And it's been really cool to see my family get onto all these fish. And it's been really fun making these memories.
That's so cool. Yeah. So in this podcast and video, if you're watching on the YouTuber, we are going to talk about the 90-10 zone. That's, that in any given area, even on family vacations, 90% of the feeding fish can be found in just 10% of any area at any given time. Now, that zone moves because fish have tails and no fences. They're certainly moving every day, and tide cycles are moving, obviously, during every month and season. So we're really going to hammer home that 90-10. And a big part of it, because I've been in your shoes, both on amazing trips and trips where I struggled. And most of it does come to that pre-trip planning, right? And then two, being able to quickly identify a dead zone, because that's the worst. If you only have an hour in the morning to fish before the kids get up and all that, and you're in a dead zone, you're not going to catch fish. And so you have to be able to quickly say, all right, this is a good spot. Like, there's fish here. I know, even if I have to wait in a few more minutes, or to say, you know what, this is an absolute dead zone, I'm moving on. We'll talk about some lures, etc. But first, probably the most important question of this podcast. You're up in Pensacola. You're not too far away from Alabama. Have you gone to see my boy? It's just like a mini mall. Hey, Montgomery Flea Market. It's just like a mini mall.
It's on the trip itinerary, but we have not gone yet. It's gonna happen. It's gonna happen, and I'm sure we'll put the link to that video below so people know exactly what we're talking about, because you don't want to miss that one. That's an awesome.
Hopefully you guys. I think the guy made The Simpsons, the show. I think they did like a little skit about him. It's hilarious. If you haven't seen it, like I said, we'll put a link or go to YouTube and look up Montgomery Flea Market. It's just like a mini mall. Hey. It's kind of funny side story. I think I told you this because you had not seen that video before, and you and I were on a road trip a while back, and I shared it with you, and I was like, man, we ran into this guy. So back in my prior life, we had a sales team, and we got a trip that we went to Biloxi. We were going fishing in Biloxi. So of course you get there a day early and you go hit the casinos in Biloxi. And we ran into that guy, and that was right at the time that viral video was like a big thing. And this guy when you see him, and he was there in Biloxi because that's not too far away from Montgomery Flea Market. And we ended up getting pictures with him and having a drink with him and hanging out with him. It was such a trip. And obviously we got him to sing his little jingle, and he nailed it. I mean, just a voice that just keeps on giving.
I'm jealous. That you got to meet the superstar.
Well, you have your chance. I'm sure he still works there, and he's probably up there in the front with the suit on, and living rooms, bedrooms, dinettes.
Lord, I hope so.
Oh man. All right. We could end this podcast now and it would be a success. I'm smiling just ear to ear thinking about Montgomery Flea Market. But that's not why you tuned in. You want You want to learn the tools, the tricks to catch redfish, speckled trout, snook, flounder, wherever you might be on vacation, because that is tough, right? I think a lot of us, we get in a comfort zone. We fish the same areas over and over again. I'm guilty as well. And then all of a sudden you're put into a new environment, sometimes whole new state, and you can be a little bit overwhelmed. So I'd love to hear what you did. Kind of walk us through the steps, because you guys have been killing it just from the pictures I've seen in the insider community. You guys are catching a lot of fish in a really short amount of time in a brand new area. So what did you do?
Yeah. So the biggest thing first you need to take into consideration is, what time of year are you fishing? And then you can start looking at satellite maps, knowing where you need to be fishing. And this is a lot of stuff we touch on in the Spots Mastery course, because fish are going to hold in different areas at different times of the year. And a lot of it has to do with DO2 levels and water temperature. And in summertime, those are the two main drivers that we're going to first look for: areas that have high levels of DO2, because as the water temperature
Can you explain
rises,
what DO2 is for people that failed biology or chemistry? Chemistry. Yeah, there you go.
So DO2 is dissolved oxygen. Basically, in the same way that you and I need oxygen to breathe, fish need dissolved oxygen. So we're going to be looking for areas in the summertime that have these high levels of DO2, because as water temperatures rise, DO2 levels drop. It's literally like science that will always happen. When it gets warmer, there's less DO2. So we're looking for areas where there's cooler water, deeper water, thermoclines, things like that are going to provide higher levels of DO2. Cooler water generally has that higher level. So we're looking for areas that are closer to passes and inlets, because we know the colder water from the Gulf is coming in through that pass, that inlet, and it's not sitting in a shallow bay that's getting warmed up really quickly, or it's, an incoming tide and you've got that just really quick flush of cool water into a shallow bay that can fire fish up. So there's a lot of different ways that you can find DO2. Another big thing that happens is seagrass is a natural producer of DO2. So if you find an area that's close to a pass or an inlet, has a lot of seagrass, and you can see that it's close to some areas with deeper water, if it's along the edge of a deeper bay or a deeper channel, these are all factors that are going to contribute to higher levels of DO2. That, again, I cannot stress how important it is for fish to have DO2 in the summertime, because when you get in shallow areas that aren't getting influxes of cool water and they're just really hot, those fish literally will die in those areas. We've seen in some of Tony's reports in Mosquito Lagoon, when they dam up some of those areas that don't get influxes of cold water, those redfish, those trout, they all float up to the surface and they just die, because it's not an area that they can survive in. So when we think about where fish are going to move and comfortably feed, it's going to be in those areas with high levels of DO2. So that's the first thing that we were looking for.
Honestly, it's no different than humans. If you just want to put a simple analogy, in the summertime, what do humans like to do? We like to be, even though we're outside, if you were out in 104-degree weather, you get sluggish. You don't even want to eat. All you want to do is find a way to cool down, whether it be a breeze or a fan or an AC, inside, you want to find a way to cool down, and vice versa. In the wintertime, it's why people get cabin fever in really cold states. They're trying to find a fire, anything that could possibly keep them warm, and fish are the same way. It doesn't mean they're not going to eat, just like we're still going to eat if it's 104. We might just be miserable and sweating all over our public sub, but we're still going to be a whole lot more enjoyable and more lively and just more full of life when we have an AC or a nice fan or a nice breeze. So that's always way I even tell my kids, just think of it that way. Their fish are just very similar to humans. They don't want to be uncomfortable.
Absolutely. We're looking for areas where these fish are going to be comfortably feeding. Where is it easy for them to have all of their biological needs taken care of, and then they can now take care of, eating and getting calories. Yep. So that's the next thing we're looking for is where are we going to have conveyor belts of food, or where are we going to have high numbers of bait fish? And the areas that we selected were those grass flats where we know there's tons of pinfish, tons of shrimp.
So why were they there during this time?
So again, what we've got is a lot of docks that are close to this grass flat. So it's just really good structure for bait fish to hold on and be able to kind of duck away from predators. And again, in the summertime, what we do have is a lot of small bait fish. In the winter, we see a lot of bait fish kind of disappear off the flats. But in the summertime, there's tons of small pinfish, tons of small croakers, tons of all the demersal finfish is, I believe, the biological term. These small little bait fish in the flats, that's what we have the highest biomass basically that these predators are feeding on are small bait fish and grass flats. If you're, in an area that's marsh creeks, things like that, generally you're going to have a lot of mullet that show up in the marshes this time of year. So there's different species that show up in different areas, but in areas that have grass flats, which is, I would say most people that are going on vacation generally are going to somewhere like Florida, or they're going to the coastline of Texas, where there are a lot of grass flats and close to passes and inlets. That's where you're going to find most of that biomass, most of those little bait fish and pinfish that are in the grass, that are close to docks, all those areas where those, that bait can sit and not have to worry about predators kind of picking them off super easily. If they're just out in open sand, they have nowhere to hide. They have nowhere to take cover. So we're looking for those areas where predators can easily source food while being close to those areas with high levels of DO2. So those were the really big things that we were looking for. And then the next thing was, how simple is it going to be for me and my family to fish? Obviously, we can't walk out 3 miles onto a flat if it's surrounded by intercoastal channels. We don't have a kayak, we don't have a boat, and unless you go out and rent those things, it can be kind of tough to know where you're going to fish. And I see a lot of people just opt to go fish in the surf. And I want to say that it's probably a lot harder to fish in the surf than most people think it is. They just think, oh, all I have to do is pop a rod in a rod holder and put out a piece of shrimp or put out fish bites, things like that. Surf fishing has a lot that goes into it, and it is a lot more unpredictable than flats fishing.
Yes.
So I find that it's actually easier to pick wade fishing spots because you can scout them out a lot easier. You have a lot more control of all the variables. And I find that those fish are a little bit more cooperative and predictable than the fish that are in the surf. That's just my personal opinion. I went out and did vacation fishing in the surf for years and years and years. And a lot of it was just the weather would never cooperate. The fish didn't seem to be running at that time. And you can never stray too far from the family. And then the swimmers show up, and it's so much tougher, I believe, to surf fish. And if people would instead find areas that they can wade fish for redfish, speckled trout, flounder, even snook, if you're in an area that has them, it's a lot easier, I find, with a family fishing to catch those species than instead going to the surf and trying for pompano and whiting, things that may be or may not be running. And it's just a lot easier to be inshore fishing for those reds, trout, and flounder.
Yeah. And depending on the time of the year, but the wind, right? The wind will make or break you on the surf. And then some times of year, and depending on where you are, you've got those weeds. And I remember the last time I was at 30A, kind of up near your neck of the woods, Sandestin area. And I went out thinking, hey, I'm gonna do some surf fishing. And I only had 2 days to do it. And both mornings I get up, and I'm talking like you couldn't even make a cast and retrieve more than like 2 feet before the thing was literally just covered with seaweed. I mean, it was just, and you've seen it before, right? Where, I mean, it's just everywhere. It's washing up on the beach, and there's no way you're going to catch fish. I mean, not to say no way, it just makes it really, really tough. Even if you have a big sinker and you're, using fish bites or a sand flea, it's still really, really tough when there's that much out there.
Absolutely. And again, you are at the mercy of the tides and where those fish are going to be moved, and they might feed later on in the day. I find that fish will feed in the surf. They'll feed later on in the day because there is that colder water from the Gulf. So you might not actually get the hottest morning bite that you would get inshore. And that's another thing in terms of efficiency. We talk about, we're on a family vacation. How can we maximize our fishing success and time while not cutting into the rest of our family? We might have folks that don't want to go out fishing with us. We might have kids that may not be able to wade out. So how can we go fishing, have success, but also not actually cut into our family's vacation and kind of be a little bit selfish with our time? And inshore fishing is fantastic in the fact that most of the predators that we're targeting are, I don't know if the word crepuscular would be correct, but
Gesundheit.
Well, when you're deer hunting, we refer to deer as crepuscular. They feed and they move around early morning hours. I don't know if the term still applies inshore fishing, but we see trout feed so heavily in twilight periods because their eyes are so sensitive. We see a lot of increased activity from redfish and flounder as well. So the bite is hottest first thing in the morning when the sun's rising at 6 a.m. to like 8. And I have not stayed out this entire vacation past 9 a.m. in the morning. And it's been really nice just going out and having really good success right at sunrise. It's beautiful. I have my coffee, I go out and have my family with me, and we get pretty much all the fishing we could want done in the morning. It's very successful. We're not out there sweating. It's not uncomfortable. And the fish are very cooperative first thing in the morning, especially in the summer, because during the night, that water cools off. Again, we talked about DO2 levels with higher water temperatures. First thing in the morning, those fish can now start to see. They've got the highest levels of DO2. They're very comfortable and they're very willing to feed. So I find that first thing in the morning, before anybody's up, you're out there and you're able to have the most success being efficient with your time. You can come in sometimes before your family's even up. Some of my other family members decided they'd, sleep in. So I'd go out and I can get my fishing done in before they even wake up. And then you've got your fishing in, you can go out and do all the other vacation activities you have planned, and you're not cutting into anybody else's time. So in terms of efficiency, again, inshore fishing is taking the cake over surf fishing, where you might have to sit out there all day to get a bite.
And then you have all day to drink White Claws.
Lord, I knew you were going to bring it up.
Yeah, I got you. White Claw Wyatt. All right. So that's super helpful. Talk about the types of areas that you're fishing out. So if you're not hitting the surf so much, are you finding little bays? Are you finding causeways, bridges? Because I think that's the second question comes up. Okay, cool. I'm not going to hit the surf. I don't maybe have the right gear. I just want to take some of my slam shadies and power prawns and Alabama leprechauns. But, where do I go?
Yeah, so we the two areas that we've hit are, the first one is literally right behind where we're staying. And I'll tell you another great tip is when you're booking your place, don't book the places that are on the beach. They're way more expensive. If you can find the inside of the bay that's, possibly on a grass flat, way cheaper, and you're in prime inshore fishing zone. So that's another little quick tip there. So you save money and you catch more fish. Sounds a lot like the Salt Strong Insider Club. But if you go and you look for those shorelines that are adjacent to grass flats where you can very clearly see the bottom, when you're looking on satellite maps, if you have a hard time seeing the bottom and you've gone through Google Earth and you've looked through a couple different historical images, which is something that we teach, you can see different water clarities. And the more clearly and defined you can see the bottom, the more likely it is that you're able to actually get out there and wade. Sometimes it's tough to know what's deep and what's not, but if you can very clearly see the bottom and it almost looks like it's not deep water. And usually when you go and look at satellite images, the darker that water image clarity is, I'm trying to think of a good way to explain this. As that image gets a little bit more granular, it gets darker, greener usually, that's generally deeper water. The lighter and whiter that image is, as you're looking at the shoreline, the more likely it is to be shallow. As you get deeper, you have less light penetration. So if you think about it that way, the shorelines where you can very clearly see the bottom are more likely to be wadeable. So what I'm looking for, again, we're close to those passes and inlets. I'm looking for those grass flats that are generally a mix of sand and grass, because those predators can kind of poke in and out and look at different things and ambush those bait fish on the edges of the grass and in the potholes. So I'm looking for areas where I can easily pull off at a parking lot, or I can, park at a restaurant and I can walk over a bridge or something. We did that. And usually there's just those open grass flats that you can fish. But if you can find any Spartina grass, raised grass that's around, those are really good to fish as well at high tide for those reds. They'll go poking along the edges. For the trout, generally, I'm sticking to the deeper water. Trout are a little bit more sensitive than redfish to temperature. So even in the summertime, they don't generally push up super shallow. And you'll find them on the edges of the grass flats, usually on the drop-offs. This morning, we had a hard time getting the trout to hit the top water shallow. They were there first thing at dusk. But when we moved to the deeper edges of the flats and we started bouncing some power prawns on some heavier jig heads, we were able to get into that deeper water where there was higher levels of DO2. Those fish were a little bit more comfortable. It was like we immediately started hitting them. It was like very dead for a while trying to get those trout. And then the moment we moved off the edge of the flat where it was a little bit deeper, that's where we started getting them. So we're standing in probably 3 feet of water, casting into like 8. And that's where we started hitting the trout. Most of the reds have come in, knee deep to waist deep water. They're very shallow. And the flounder was actually caught in like 2 feet of water. It was right up next to a dock. So we've gotten the slam all in an area that's completely wadeable. It's just adjusting where you're casting and where you're focusing a presentation for each species. If you think about reds, they're going to most generally be hanging in that 1 to 3 foot range. I would say that's where we find the most of them. Trout are a little bit deeper because, again, they're a little more sensitive to those warmer temperatures and that DO2. Flounder flat out don't care. Just find an area where they're going to be able to post up behind a structure and wait for that current to bring them food. They're the laziest fish out of all of them. So find some piece of hard structure where they're going to post up behind and ambush that bait as it's pulled with current.
So this spot in particular, is this a public access spot?
Yeah, you could park on the side of the road. You could park at a restaurant. There's several beach access points, and you would literally just walk across through, a public road, and you could be in this flat. I actually put the report up in the Insider Club where I've been fishing, and put 2 up, I think now. And you could see exactly where this flat was. It's in Pensacola Beach, and you'll see my name on the report. But it's just an easily accessed flat. You can walk, several miles of shoreline and hit these exact types of areas. But we've not strayed more than 20, 30 minutes from our house because, we're ducking and weaving under these docks and hitting these small grass flats. And it's just consistent action all around because this is the perfect place for fish to be. I would think that most of the fish that are kind of spread out throughout the bay at different times of year, this is where, we talk about the 90-10 rule, 90% of those populations are going to kind of start to congregate because it's just very easy feeding for them. That cold water comes in from the bay. There's a lot of finfish in the area, and they're just comfortable and they can feed here. They've got a good source of food. So it's just exactly where you would want to be fishing. And it's really easy to target them because, again, they're not going to be picky when they're comfortable. And all I've used when I've been out there is just 3 simple presentations. First thing in the morning before the sun comes up. And as the sun's coming up, I've got a little rule. Take your hand, put it on the horizon. If the sun is not over your hand, I know you're laughing at my shadow puppet, Joe, but this works. It works. If you put your hand on the horizon, right, and the sun is not above your thumb, you can fish top water and it's very effective. The moment that the sun gets above your thumb, that's when I would switch to a subsurface presentation. And we've seen that day in and day out. The fish might still come up and start taking whacks at your top water. It's not that they won't hit it, but they'll most likely miss it. I missed several blowups this morning because I didn't listen to my shadow puppet rule, and the sun was up, and I had a couple trout that came up and just missed my top water. And it's not that they're not going to try and eat it. It's that it's harder for them to see it because now that the sun's higher, we use this as a gauge. It's higher and it's shining like directly into their eyes. And it makes it very hard for them to zero in on that bait that's moving kind of quickly and get an accurate strike. And that's when we started switching to the Slam Shady. My brother hit one of the trout on the Slam Shady, and I started hitting them on the Power Prawn. So again, working subsurface presentations later on in the morning from I would say the sun was above my hand probably at 8:30-ish. And then from 8:30 to 9, we were just hitting trout on the edges of the flat, but it was top water, everything else. And the big 24-inch trout that I caught, sun was below my hand. I got that on top water. And same thing with my brother's redfish that he's caught. We've caught a ton of reds and trout, but it's just been following that rule. Subsurface presentations when the sun gets up a little bit higher, and the top water up until that point.
Did you listen to the hand after that?
Hey,
Yes,
Wyatt, please listen to me next time. I will help you find the fish.
There we go. Yeah, I did. So I'm going to make sure that I follow that hand rule tomorrow and don't miss out on any of those trout.
Let's talk about the 3 Bs. I saw someone in our community had and I definitely want to find out who it was and forward them this because this is really helpful. They were, I don't remember where it was, but it was somewhere in Florida on vacation near it sounded like a beach and an area where they had access to do some wading. And there's just so much area. This is all foreign to me. It was a new state. I think they might have been from North Carolina or Virginia. So they're in Florida, brand new spot, and it's overwhelming. And part of my advice was always going to the 3 Bs. I don't know that area personally. I didn't see a screenshot of where they were. And I know Luke and I did this in Marco Island, and because that's a big area as well. We hadn't been there in a long time. We're only going to fish areas where we saw white egret. Because it's a bird, right? So the 3 Bs are birds, and then visible signs of bait, and then boils, meaning you're actually stirring up some fish that you're seeing, some action, some activity, some life, and it usually works. I know there's not white egrets everywhere you go, but just in terms of finding birds and baits and boils, is that held true in this vacation here?
Absolutely. So what I really like seeing on the shoreline, and we see them every morning, it's really cool, those big blue herons. Yeah. Those are my favorite bird to see because those herons are really eating big bait fish. And when I know there's big bait fish around, there's generally big predators. So I've not seen any of the white ibises or those white egrets. It's been a lot of those big herons. Any kind of wading bird that's got those long beaks that we know is going after those bait fish. If there's bait fish around, there's generally predators. So that's always a good thing to see. If you can't see the bait fish jumping, usually if you look near those egrets or near those herons, you will see bait fish. So that's a very good sign. And we've had that every morning that we've gone out. I'm not seeing a lot of seagulls diving on bait or pelicans diving on bait, but there's been a lot of wading birds. And for us fishing those shallows, that's a really good sign. Now, we've seen a lot of mullet jumping around. And one thing I want to clarify is if you see mullet that are, they look like they're just having a good time. And they come up out of the water and you'll see one jump and he'll go up really high and he'll go back down. And usually he'll jump again and he'll do it 3-4 times. That is not necessarily the best sign, but it lets you know there's bait in an area. I'd rather see that than nothing at all. But we did have a really cool indicator that there was feeding fish in the area. Me and my brother were waiting right next to each other. I actually got it on my GoPro. About 60 pogies or mullet, or not mullet, menhaden, L-wise, like Hollywood calls them. They're a different type of bait fish. We had like 60 of them jump at us all at once because something was chasing them. And they all came out of the water. If you ever see menhaden jump, which are much different in size and shape than mullet, that is a very good sign because those fish don't naturally jump. If you see a lot of mullet that are skittering along the surface, that's a good sign something's chasing them. But if you're just seeing one kind of jumping like a dolphin, having a good time, nothing's really chasing him. I don't know why they do it. It's a phenomenon that occurs. But if you see pogies jumping, if you see glass minnows jumping, any bait that's running from something, cast in that area. That's how we found those trout this morning. We saw some pogies that were flipping and then, they were all jumping out of the water. They were showering. We cast it over to that area and immediately started hitting trout. So bait, birds, really good signs. It's tough when you're waiting to see boils. Yep. Usually when you're up in a boat, you can see that pluff. What is another good sign is if you are looking at that bait, you can see swirls around it. And if you're fishing top waters, you will see swirls on your top waters. That's why I like the top waters when I'm lower to the water in my kayak or when I'm wading. If that fish doesn't give me the blow up, I can at least see the swirl. And that's why I really do like the top waters. But the Moonwalker has been phenomenal on this trip because it's helped me quickly assess areas because I can fish it pretty quickly in terms of, a power prawn is a little bit of a slower presentation. I can use that Moonwalker to just walk the dog over a grass flat. And I know that if there's anything in that area before that sun gets up too high, it's usually going to come up and try and take a whack at it. So I'm getting a lot of data from blowups, from swirls. I can assess the energy levels of the fish. So it really helps me know whether it's a good feeding zone or not. I use the top water as, kind of my fish finder. And then when it's a little bit higher up in the day, I'm using the paddle tail for the same kind of purpose. But once I find those fish and I really want to start picking them apart, I'll use a jerk shad or I'll use the artificial shrimp because I can keep that lure in the strike zone a little bit longer. So I would say that boils are tough when you're waiting. But if you're in a boat, you're in a kayak, you can usually see those a lot easier. So that's one small part of the 3 Bs that's been a little bit tough for us, but we still have the bait and we still have the birds. So I would say that 100% still applies. And I use the top water to kind of find those boils, create them myself. So that's I would say yes. The 3 Bs have definitely been concurrent here.
Cool. I'm glad you said yes, because that was going to be one of the really big lessons here. I teased it earlier, like how to know when you're in a dead zone and when you should move immediately. Is if let's just say we're going to talk about wade fishing right here, because on vacation we're assuming you're not bringing your boat or kayak. So assuming you're on foot or up to your waist or nipples, wherever you might be wading, you have to see at least one, if not two, right? And if you're in a boat and you have a little bit more leverage to see boils, then that's cool. But so many times people are like, oh man, I got skunked. Like, well, did you see any signs of bird or bait? Like, no, like move. No matter how cool it looked on a map, no matter how cool your buddy said it was, a year ago or even a week ago, if you're not seeing at least one, if not two of those things, then move. And I'm not saying you can't make one cast just to try to prove me wrong, but because that happens occasionally where you don't see, visibly see it right then and there. But me personally, if I'm on vacation, and this is all about being efficient, right? You mentioned it, you don't want to make mama or your wife mad, or the same if they're one and the same. You do not want to make mom, as much as my wife likes to fish, she does not want the vacation to turn into a fishing vacation. I'm sure your mom's the same way.
Oh yeah.
So if you want to make them happy, you want to maximize your time. And so like that should be your rule of thumb when you're going to a new spot. Don't even fish. Don't even wet a line if you don't have to, unless you see at least one, if not two. Those birds and baits. Boils, like I said, we'll keep that to the side for now. And that will save you so much time. I want to kind of move over to the pre-trip planning. You gave a cool tip about finding a vacation home, and I do that all the time too. If we're going to a new spot, I'm in the driver's seat in terms of picking it. Obviously, I make sure my wife agrees, but I'll actually go to VRBO or Airbnb and I'll find the thing, and then I'll get on Google Satellite Maps and check it out. And I mean, it's a time saver. And to your point, if you're not literally on the beach, it can save you a lot of money as well. Sometimes it's the way it works out that you need to be on the beach. But that's one cool trick, is to, before you book the place, really scout that area out. And you'll find some areas, there's some little lagoons and some old lakes, depending on time of year you're on vacation, that are only accessible to the people in that condominium area or those apartments or those homes. And you could be sitting on a honey hole that no one else has even have access to. So that's kind of one tip. But let's assume you've already booked a place. Maybe you're on vacation right now and you're frustrated. What do you do with your pre-trip planning? Are you just using Google Satellite Maps? How much time you spend in? What's the plan? You got A, B, and C and D, and then backup E. What are you doing?
Yeah, so usually what I do is, first, obviously, I'm going to look at the area on a satellite map. And I do like Google Earth because it does have that historical imagery tool. So let's say that the Google Maps image that you're looking at on your phone was taken recently when it was a day that was windy or whatever. If you use Google Earth, which, disclaimer, you can only have that on a desktop or laptop. It's not available on mobile. But if you use that historical imagery tool, you can scroll back in time and find an image that was taken in the winter, which is usually when you get the clearest water, and you can really see everything about that flat. One thing to note is that in the wintertime, usually there's not a whole lot of seagrass. So it's not good for knowing, where there's going to be grass. And it's very important. It's something that we noticed when we were out here waiting. When we were fishing over just straight sand, absolutely nothing. But when we got grass, that was a very good place to be fishing. Back to pre-trip planning. I'm also going to be using smart fishing tides so that I know where that tide's going to be moving. That's the service that we have on saltstrong.com. It just lets me know, pretty much everything about the day, when the winds are going to be picking up, where the wind's going to be coming from, so that I can kind of plan where bait's going to be getting blown. I can see where the tide's going to be moving, which is another big thing, especially if you're going after flounder, which they feed so heavily with the tide. And being able to present your bait with the current is really important. So I'm going to be knowing where that current's coming from. I know where that wind's going to be manipulating bait. I can know everything about the spot I'm going to be going to, how that water is going to be moving, everything. And then when the temperature is going to kick up as well. So I know, maybe we need to move through this flat a little bit more quickly. We've kind of figured out what areas we need to spend more time in. We talked about moving quickly. If I can see that the temperature is going to pick up, really heavily, like this morning, it was really cool when we got out, really low winds. And with a low wind day, the water heats up a lot faster. So we had to prioritize areas that we were going to be fishing on this small flat a little bit differently. So we kind of moved through the first area quickly. We didn't get many bites, moved through the second area quickly, and we got to our area that we wanted to really spend some time in. But knowing that it was going to heat up really quickly. It's an area that we had really good luck at the past 2 days. We weren't getting bites. So we knew that it was going to heat up. We were like, all right, we got to keep moving quick. We're not getting bites. And then we moved on to the next flat, and we were there at the right time. There was bait popping, all the stuff we just talked about. And we were there before it got really hot. And we actually had to come in early this morning because it got warmer than it has the past couple of days without the wind. So that's having all those weather factors from smarttides.com is really important for me. I can see the tide, I can see wind, temperature, all that. That's really important for me. But the satellite imagery is important as well. So that's in terms of just the condition side of things, that's important, but knowing the trends as well. And what I've done is referenced a lot of the reports from our community. Shout out to Dave Ott, who covered this area so well when he lived here. He moved away from Pensacola. He's one of our lifers. Dave made so many awesome reports here that I went through and kind of tried to assess the trends of where fish will be holding this time of year. All the stuff we talked about. Again, I come from, fishing North Carolina, marshes, things like that. I've just started to kind of learn grass flats in Texas, but I wanted to, reference and see what happens here in the summertime in Pensacola. And Dave caught a lot of his trout on grass flats that were close to passes and inlets this time of year. So just being able to go in the community, see what the historical trends for this area was, really helped me dial in on where I needed to be fishing. And that's why I'm having the success that I did, because I was able to look at what other members have had success with in this area. I don't believe there was anybody that had ever fished the shoreline that I saw in the community, but I was able to pull, the information from other reports and see exactly where I needed to be fishing in terms of where fish feed this time of year. So In terms of pre-trip planning, smartfishingtides.com, Google Earth, and the Insider Club in terms of just referencing those historical trends.
And then I don't know if I missed it, but like, do you always say, all right, I'm going to have, 3 different spots? Are you, do you have like a complete backup, like where you have to get in your vehicle and drive, or you just try to like maximize one area?
So if it was just me, I would have had a backup. But again, I don't want to drag my family all around and do that to them. So it's more about, okay, we're going to have a shallow water game plan. We're going to start off looking for redfish. And then if that doesn't pan out, if the reds just aren't in the area, we're going to go look for trout a little bit deeper. So I have,
but all within walking distance, you're saying?
Yes. So I might hit one area of a flat that's more in tune for redfish. Maybe it's a shallower flat that's got a little bit more grass on it, but it's not deep enough for trout. I know that all my presentations are going to be dialed in on redfish, low and slow. Maybe I'm working my top waters at a different cadence. There's very minute things that I'm going to do. This is a lot of stuff we teach in the Insider Club, how you can kind of fine tune your presentation based on each species. And maybe we'll walk over to a different area on the flat that we know would be better for trout if the redfish, game isn't panning out, or if, we're dead set on going for flounder, we're going to be going over to those docks and we're going to be jigging those pilings. You can have spots within spots. You may be at a good spot, but it might not pan out for one species. So you need to think about what you're having success with and how you can kind of bounce between all 3, 4 if you have snook in the area as well, and how you can fine tune that game plan. So yes, I do have plan A, B, and C. If it's just me fishing and I just see that the area is dead, I might go hop in my car and I'm going to go down the road and I'm going to get to a completely different part of the flat. Usually, if I am going to hop in my car and I can see the area, the bay or the shoreline that I'm going to be fishing, I am looking for those birds. If I'm going to have to stop on a shoreline, doesn't matter what I saw on the satellite maps. If I'm not getting any kind of real-time data from the birds, if I'm not seeing bait jumping, I'm not even going to pull my car over. I'm going to keep going. So I definitely have backup spots. I just haven't done this on this family vacation. If it was, somebody that was out with their family and they wanted to hit that early morning trip before anybody else woke up, I would have several of those spots in your pocket. But for me, it's just wanting to take my family out. It's just been this flat that we've focused on.
Cool. That's awesome. Hope you guys found this helpful, right? One other cool part, you've touched on it a few times, but it's the Insider Club. And some of you might not know this. Even some of our members sometimes get shocked, like, oh, I didn't know you guys were doing this. So we have this massive map that now has like 20,000 pins. And it all started with Luke and I, and then Tony going out and fishing a new spot, like with GoPros on and showing everything from like Wyatt. Literally, if you remember, you can see exactly where he's fishing. Like everything we're talking about right now is in our club. And I'm talking like the on the water footage, him getting on Google Maps, showing not just the spot, because the spot's one thing, but the most important part, you hit it, is the trends, is why did I pick that spot? Why was that spot good? And I don't know if you saw mine, but I did one nearby. I went to Perdido Key with my family, first time fishing there, and ended up meeting up with old Dave. And we went and found a great spot at a state park. That's another thing that a lot of people, I don't really know if I should be fishing here. And there's weird signs and no parking. I mean, in pretty much every big city and area in Florida, there's going to be some type of state park that has some access to a pretty good fishery. And there's one in Perdido Key in particular that we absolutely destroyed the fish. And I did the same thing. I showed exactly where we parked our cars. I showed exactly where we caught all the fish, but most importantly, why, so that you can replicate that anywhere. And we got Tony doing that all over the place. Wyatt is usually doing them over in Texas. Luke is doing them on the west coast of Florida. And we're doing those every single week on top of all of our members who are sharing all their information, right? This is the whole anglers helping other anglers. It's a community. It's a network of people all sharing. And now we have 25,000 plus members. It's a pretty powerful network. And it's why we're such big advocates of it. We're constantly talking about it because it flat out works. It's everything that we wish was around when we weren't maximizing our time, and not when we were bad fishermen per se. We were inconsistent. And we knew we'd spent all this money on our equipment. Like, to me, the biggest sin in the world as a fisherman is to spend all this money on this nice equipment, and including or not including boats and kayaks and all this stuff, but even just your rods and reels and your braided line and all this stuff, and then not maximize it. Like, that's crazy. That's like buying a $30,000 set of golf clubs and never using them or practicing, or just hitting the driving range with them. and shanking balls left and right, never getting good. Like that, to me, that's horrible, and it's not fun. So we wanted to make fishing fun. We wanted to make it, a family thing that anyone can do, and that you could do confidently and have a ton of fun doing it. And we see, I don't know if you saw that email that just came in, but the father and the wife and their two little boys that are, their whole family's getting into it. Like, man, we're just so grateful. All the stuff we're learning. You guys are just like cutting out years and years of hard learning, trial and error, the old school fashioned way, just giving shortcuts. So if you're into that, come join us in the club. And if you're already a member, thank you so much. You are family to us. And make sure you look at these insider reports. They are incredibly helpful. I mean, not only do you get to see like why it's actually fishing, but once again, you get to see some of the pre-trip planning and the thinking and the on the water footage of where exactly like how he's casting, how he's retrieving. It's like game film. If you want to get good at football or baseball or volleyball or anything, you watch game film, you see how the best people do it, and you learn from it. And it's so valuable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for the longest time, I was locked into the mindset that, oh, it's the lure. It's, I don't have the nicest reel. It's gotta be the equipment. No one wants to admit that they just don't have a good grasp of the concepts, and they don't know how to pick the right spots. And it's so sad because you can have all this great gear, and those kind of 1% things can add up to helping you catch, one or two more fish here or there just by little features on different products, things like that. But 95% of being a good fisherman is understanding fish biology, which is what we teach in our Spots Mastery. It's what we hammer home in the weekend game plan that we put out every Friday, like all the current trends, things like that, how to go out and understand where the fish are going to be and what they're doing. That's the most important part of it. And I just hope that anybody listening to this, don't go out, buy any more tackle. You don't need it. Literally all you need is like a paddle tail, nothing crazy, a very simple lure. And you can go out and catch a lot of fish if you just know what the trends are and how to pick those areas on satellite maps. That's all you need to know to become a really good fisherman. So I hope you guys join us in the Salt Strong Insider Club, because we want to see everybody that joins our club become better anglers. It's so awesome to see the people that join that have questions, and then you see the reports that get published. They go out and they have success in a brand new area. It's like, man, you're almost sharing in that success. And I love seeing it, and being able to go and put family members on fish as well. It's like, it's just a great community. I can't say enough good things about it.
Yep. So come join us, saltstrong.com. You can find out all the information there to join us in the Insider Club. And even though Wyatt said, don't buy new tackle, and we've preached that over and over again, we're fishermen. We still like to buy tackle. And that's why we do have a tackle store. But it's a lot different, and it's very unique compared to other tackle stores that just carry a bunch of stuff, half of it being junk, in my opinion. We only carry the stuff that we personally spend our own money on, and we flat out know works. And then we give you, 20 to even 25, 30% off in some cases, but I'm usually a minimum 20% across the board, everything in the store. And that's all at fishstrong.com. So saltstrong.com, joking here. Saltstrong.com is where you go to join the club if you're not a member already. Fishstrong.com is the online tackle store. And once you're logged in as a member, you'll see your special pricing. So come join us, Wyatt. Great job. Go enjoy the family. I know you're still on vacation right now, so I appreciate you doing this. But we also like to do stuff real time. We like to have it timely, and we like to make sure that we're putting out information like as we're doing it, because I think that's the best way while it's fresh in the mind. So can't wait to see how the rest of the trip goes, my friend.
Absolutely. Thanks, guys, for tuning in.
Peace. We out. Go to saltstrong.com. It's just like a mini moth. Hey, hey.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was